We know that As You Sow came out with a corporate plastic pollution scorecard where you ranked companies on their progress toward their goals around plastic. Can you tell us more about this report and the key criteria that was used in scoring?
This report was something As You Sow wanted to pursue, and really why I was hired about 5 years ago to help develop. Because the investment firms, the financial firms that we were working with, other investors, wanted greater clarity on which companies were really taking action to ensure that their plastic packaging was not becoming waste, really working to take the steps to create a circular economy versus those that might be lagging. So we developed this scorecard to give investors that picture. And we have periodically done these types of reviews of companies, but our last scorecard was the most holistic, where we received input from several different NGOs, from company representatives, and other stakeholders in determining what the different aspects were for corporate action and how could we rank those. So ultimately, we ended up with quite a large metric ranking system. We have 44 metrics where we evaluate whether or not companies have taken that action. And those 44 metrics are split up into 6 pillars. There are things like design of packaging, use of recycled content, use of reusable packaging, packaging transparency, support for U.S. recycling infrastructure, and then support for extended producer responsibility.
That's excellent, and that's quite a good amount of categories to be looking at that all hit on really important aspects. If you think about it, uh, you can't just say we're going to recycle. It starts with the design. It starts with the infrastructure. There's so many different things that have to be factored in here, and I know that we do a lot with companies to encourage them to do what we call sustainable product innovation, to think about how they're going to design products. And I always tell them, in fact, we did a session on this yesterday, tell the companies to think about the end of life in mind. Like when you're done with this package or this product, what is going to happen to it, and how can you make it so it can be recovered, reused, the valuable materials are not lost. So it's really cool that you've laid out that scorecard looking at all those different steps to identify, good direction. So based on what you just said, I was just curious, do you have any recommendations for companies that have been scored on how they can get better scores in the future? Any kind of recommendations or learnings that might have come out of this for you as you did the report?
Absolutely. And it is so aligned with what you just said, Tad. It is incorporating that mindset of a circular economy into the original packaging design. And it is changing the mindset, the corporate mindset of responsibility for packaging, to not just be up until the consumer purchases that item, but all the way until the packaging or that original product has its end of life and is either landfilled, recycled, incinerated, or hopefully not, but sometimes polluted into the environment. So extending their responsibility and putting measures in place to make sure that the way that this package is handled aligns with the corporate value of sustainability. So truly adopting that circular economy mindset is something that we encourage companies to do. That's our number one recommendation. And we would hark to companies like Unilever, whose CEO, Alan Jobe, has said repeatedly, and even in big letters in their sustainability report, our packaging is our financial responsibility. And Unilever backs that up with contributions to support recycling infrastructure and other projects and the like. So that's number one, is looking internally. What are we doing on our packaging? Where do we end our responsibility? Other recommendations, I would look at the areas of our scorecard where most companies did not score well. Those would primarily be on reusable packaging and on extended producer responsibility. And what we looked at there were whether or not companies had goals to expand their use of reusable packaging, or even a commitment to investigate reusable packaging. So a statement that they recognized this would increase the circularity of their business, and they were willing to commit the necessary finances and time to look into it, or they were partnering with other organizations or companies that could help them do that. And then whether or not they were reporting on how much of their product packaging, if any, was in reusables, even if it was just a pilot. And it's that type of comparable information that investors need in order to say, okay, which actions are really making a difference, which companies are actually investing in reusables versus just having like one small pilot from their several hundred different brands. And then on extended producer responsibility, I mentioned this kind of public statement of commitment, but we're also looking at whether or not companies are supporting legislation that might level the playing field on packaging at its end of life. So something like an extended producer responsibility piece of legislation that charges fees on packaging to help ensure that there are funds available to capture it at its end of life. And we have very excitedly seen 4 new pieces of legislation just in the last year and a half here in the US, 4 different states pass EPR laws. So we're seeing this come. We would love for that to happen at a national level. And we're looking for companies to step up and be the leader on that.
Yeah, that's great. And, I know we have our listeners here. We've been doing a theme of circular economy, so this is really great. And I just want to make sure that I just, provide a little insight here. When we're talking about infrastructure, what that means is the ability for people to easily recycle the material and get it recovered. That's where I've seen companies like Coca-Cola, for example, the Coca-Cola Foundation donates money to expand collection in areas where there's no collection. They donate money to expand, capacity of material recovery facilities or MRFs and different things like that. So those are all the different things that companies can do to support infrastructure. Because if they create the packaging, they can't just rely on government or somebody to make sure it's going to be collected and recovered. So they're putting some money and support into that. And I love what you're saying too about the legislation in terms of ERP, because the thing is somebody's got to pay for all this. And you do see pretty good recovery rates in what we call bottle bill states where there's a deposit on things. So just wanted to make sure we add some of that insight here and, on the things you're saying on how these things can be driven.
Coca-Cola was the highest scoring company in our second scorecard, our most recent scorecard. And that was due in large part, just as you're saying, Ted, due to their commitment to capture a bottle or can for everyone that is sold. And they are investing financially in making sure that that happens. We also worked with Coca-Cola to set a new reusable packaging goal. They were the first major company to set a reusable packaging goal. They said that 25% of their sales by volume by 2030 would be sold in container-free or reusable containers. So something like a fountain beverage, but also in a lot of their other markets, they have refill systems of existing bottles. And then we saw Pepsi. We worked with Pepsi to later announce a similar goal. So we're moving in that direction of reusable packaging and true product stewardship.